Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the FinTech Decoded podcast. As always, we will be taking a deep dive into topics that are around technology and finance that are impacting the industry and bring you experts who understand this with a deep dive on these themes. I'm Syed Musheer Ahmed. I'm the founder of FinStep Asia. Along with me is my co-host, Monica Jasuja. Our two guests today are experts in the quantum space. They have been looking at it for decades, if I may say, not aging them, but showcasing their expertise, both from an impact in financial services, but also looking at elements of blockchain as well. So, welcome, Reena and Duncan. Good to have you both.
Welcome
Thanks
to
for
you
having
both.
me. Thank you.
Maybe we'll just start off with brief introductions. Would love to hear more in your own words about your organizations and yourselves. Maybe we'll start with Reena, and then we can also hear from Duncan before we take a dive.
Thank you, Musheer. And hi, everyone. I'm Reena Dayal. I'm the founder and CEO for Quantum Ecosystems and Technology Council of India. This is a not-for-profit entity. And the mission for our organization is to enable and accelerate the quantum ecosystem in India and also to drive international collaboration in this space. So basically, we work with all the stakeholders in quantum and we do everything quantum. So right from being a think tank, making policy recommendations, to doing awareness sessions, to doing very focused networking events in this space, and a lot more. Yeah.
Really thanks everyone over here, and also thanks for having me. So I'm the founding member of Abelian, and Abelian is a quantum resistant blockchain network ecosystem. So I'm in charge of the technology side and also the expansion of the community over here. So it's really great to have the opportunity to share what we have learned and what we have built with the audience here.
Thank you so much, both, and lovely to have you. Kicking off, right? We've heard for the quantum threat and quantum computing is coming. For those of us who've done engineering, it was part of our physics, and quantum physics is one of the most fascinating things that I was looking at. And it's been a slow burn in some senses. We were talking about computing ability, etc. But in the last couple of years in particular, there has been a lot more momentum and a lot more conversations around it. So would love to hear what both of you believe is right now the actual capability of today's quantum computers, and what may be the limitations, but what state of capacity have we reached when it comes to quantum computing and quantum computers as well?
Sure. You want me to go first?
Yeah, Veena, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So I think when we look at quantum is a relatively new technology. It's a very old science, but it's a relatively new technology focus area. And in that context, all the quantum computing efforts have to be looked at from two dimensions. One is what is the current commercial capacity that exists out there? And secondly, looking at what's happening in the research labs so that you can project a little bit of what the future is going to look like. So if you want to look at the current commercial capacities, I think pretty much they are in the hundreds domain right now. For example, IBM has 140 qubit or 120 qubit machines that are out there, right? But IBM talks about a roadmap of a few thousand qubits. But we also have, IBM's technology is based on superconducting qubits. But we also have companies working on other technologies. So there are neutral atom companies who have also similar number of qubits, right? But an interesting thing to notice, for example, last year there was a big announcement by Caltech where they were able to create a 6,100 qubit array, which was made of neutral atom qubits. And 6,100 is a huge leap, right? And the coherence time was very high, 12.6 seconds, like so in the seconds, right? And in tens of seconds. So that is pretty good, very promising, which means that, while we are looking at a few hundred qubits right now in the commercial arena, we can we can look at some really higher numbers in the coming years as we move forward. So that's what exists right now in terms of the number of qubits. What does this mean for people out there, including the banking sector? It means, number of qubits is basically tells you what are the nature of applications that you can use, which are the algorithms which require X number of qubits, and can you actually run those algorithms on these systems, right? So I think right now there is a lot of banks internationally who are engaged in some of these, are evaluating these technologies, doing test beds, setting up solutions and stuff like that. But we'll talk a little bit more about it maybe a little later. Yeah.
So let me add up a little bit over here. I totally agree what Reena mentioned over here. At this moment, I think quantum computer is still at a very early stage in terms of building such a practical quantum computer. So just like what Reena mentioned over here, we are only able to build like 100, even less than 200 qubit. We are talking about the physical qubit over here. And in order to make that more meaningful, for example, say breaking some of the encryption systems, that's one of the major applications of using quantum computer, is to work on the cybersecurity area, in addition to many other use cases. But in order to, for example, crack existing practical crypto systems, you actually need thousands of, we call it the logical qubits. And in order to build such a like 1,000 or 2,000 logical qubit computer, you actually need a lot more physical qubits. For example, like 20,000 physical qubits or even more physical qubits. So just think about right now, the community will only be able to build a quantum computer which has like 100 or 200 physical qubits. It seems that we still have a long way to go before we will be able to build a really meaningful quantum computer. But having said that, the speed is really going up. I always like to think about the development speed of quantum computer as something related to Moore's law again. So the Moore's law actually applies to like in the good old days on the hardware chips, the VLSI, those IC chips. And it basically says that every 1.5 years, then the number of like transistors doubled, or basically the speed will double. And what we are seeing right now is that the quantum computer development speed is kind of like Moore's law. It's kind of like it's going to go up exponentially. I mean, the speed of development is going to go up exponentially. And some of the optimistic estimation about having a powerful enough quantum computer which can be break some of the existing crypto systems would be just like less than 10 years away from now. So that's why more and more investment and more people are actually looking into the quantum computing development, and cannot afford to ignore it at this moment, and really need to put more investment into both the development of quantum computing as well as the defense against quantum attacks. Yeah.
Duncan, I do have a follow-up question, because coming from the financial services world, we often hear about the estimate of what is likely to be a threat. But the question really becomes, where are we today with it? And that will lead to me to my next question, which is, with the current status of what quantum computing is, what is possible within the financial services world?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think this is really a great one. One thing I would like to share over here is the term, probably you have already heard about, is basically to harvest now, decrypt later. So harvest now, decrypt later basically means that imagine you have a database of all the data being encrypted, and you don't have the secret key or the private key, and you would just want to get a copy of those encrypted data. And then while the development of the quantum computer is getting more and more sophisticated, advanced, and you will have a powerful enough quantum computer that you can actually break or decrypt those encrypted data that you have as right now. Like a few years later, you have a powerful enough quantum computer, then you can basically break the system that you have or you steal today. So this kind of like so-called harvest now, decrypt later approach by, say, hackers or state-owned attackers, they are already doing that. They have been doing this for years already. So right now it's really about when, and nobody know exactly when that powerful computer, and we usually call it the cryptographically relevant quantum computer, CRQC, is available. Once it's available, while some of the systems, if you are not upgrading it, for example, some of the financial system or banking systems, or those encryption systems, including those communication systems, if those communication systems are not upgraded timely enough, or so-called, if not upgraded right now, then we really have some trouble in the near future. Yeah.
Got it. And just continuing with this same question, when we are thinking about the disruption, and you mentioned this amazing concept called harvest now, decrypt later. What is it that financial institutions should be looking at today and trying to monitor in order to be quantum ready? That would be a question that I think most people have on their mind, and I would love to also take this to Reena next.
Sure. So I think, as Duncan pointed out, this harvest now and decrypt later, and it's all prep, and the fact that we need to actually have the banks and everybody else move to a more post-quantum secure environment so there's a concept related to the day when this transition actually happens, the day we have a scalable quantum computer, when this becomes a real threat. So we call it the year 2 quantum, Y2Q. Now that must remind you about Y2K, right? Which was a big deal for the banking sector in the year 2000. The only difference is that in Y2K, you had a real deadline. You said that you had to move all your systems to be 4-digit year compliant by the year 2000. Whereas in this case, you are looking at a deadline which is a little unpredictable. And there are many points of view on this. For example, I heard Duncan talk about the fact that we have only less than 200 qubits available today, and while progress is happening at a fast rate, there are a lot of people who say, I don't know whether it is a decade away or whether it is, just 5 years from now. So just to give you a little bit of context on, there are certain, we looked at the data that people had projected about where quantum computing will be today, let's say 6 years ago, 7 years ago, right? So at that point in time, we had a couple of qubits. People were working with 2 qubits, 10 qubit kind of machines. And they grossly underpredicted the number of qubits that will be available today. So when we look at the past, what we realize is that our projections have been very underpredicted, right? So people have been very conservative. They, sort of assume that it's a difficult technology and so on. I just gave you some data that Caltech, working on neutral atoms, has shown very stable qubits, physical qubits, as 6,100 qubit array, right? Now, what is the difference between a stable qubit array and an actual quantum computer? It is about bringing in the electronics that will work together, the error correction to work on top of that, and to have all the systems going together. So essentially what happens is that there are two kinds of problems. One is the basic science conversion problem, where you make the science work for you technologically. And the second is an electronics problem. The first problem is more difficult to crack. So if you get a 6,000 qubit stable qubit array for more than 10 seconds, that's a pretty big leap. And the electronics problem is an engineering problem. It is a lot more easier to solve, right? So if you ask me, I would say that all of us in the ecosystem are grossly underestimating how soon this is going to actually come upon us. And the fact that we have not actually completed migrations already, or actually, if you look at the banking infrastructure today, people need to not only take stock of, they have to first take stock of their inventory. They have to understand what do they have, where in that club of systems that are working together for them, where do you need a migration? So where all are you using encryption algorithms? Now, if you look at a typical banking environment, there's a lot of legacy infrastructure and there is a lot of new products that are all stitched together. So I think this whole problem of discovery itself is a very big problem. So they have to first do that discovery, and then they have to have a action plan. They have to need to go out to vendors and tell them you need to be compliant by such and such date, because they're relying on off-the-shelf products also. Plus, then this whole paraphernalia of stitching things together, which they are doing by their own in-house teams and outsourced service providers. They have to get these teams together. They have to have a roadmap. They have to look at the architecture. And by the way, when you're doing such a massive exercise, you need to understand that security has always been a moving target, right? So we had RSA 10224, and now we have RSA 2048, and now we have NIST has given PQC standards. So as you try to become compliant to those standards, you feel that you are secure, at least for a couple of decades maybe. But then we all know that there will be new threats in those environments and new standards will come in. So this is a good time for people to look at their overall architectures and see, how do I make the next transition easier as well, right? So, how do I bring in that agility into my systems? Because right now these systems are hodgepodge, brought together by, starting from the legacy environment, something else stitched on top of that. And the key is to look at the architecture and define the migration roadmap and then take it through systematically. It is a multi-year exercise for most people.
Thank you so much for saying that, Reena. I would like to also hear from Duncan. Duncan, you have a technology background and you are actually at the forefront on the technology side leading these transformations. And I love what Reena said. How do we plan this transition? But the larger question for most of the financial services enterprises is that they are not monolithic in just architecture. Now they have architectures which are predate us back to many decades. How do they become quantum ready, and what is the threat? So when you speak to these bankers, how do you position this threat element that is in front of them? And like Reena said, we need to be ready now. We cannot be underestimating this.
Yeah, so maybe I can focus a little bit more on the technical aspect, like about the transition. So about the technical part of the transition is not the same as like the Y2K, right? Like the analogy that the Reena correctly pointed out over there. In fact, we basically early on we set the tone of the harvest now, decrypt later thing. Is that just think about there's a one concept which is about the life expectancy of the data itself. So just think about how long the particular data will still remain valuable. So for example, if you have some data which need to be which is valuable for say just 1 hour, say some stock price information or something like that, then you don't need strong encryption. You don't need to make sure that it is quantum resistant right now. But if you have some of the data, confidential stuff, for example, like personal sensitive information that you would like to keep, all your health information that you would like to keep for the rest of your life, then we are actually talking about the value of the data should last for decades, right? And in that case, you really need to think about how to do the encryption right now for all this newly generated data right now, how to make sure that they are already in post-quantum security. So that's why for financial institution and all that, first of all, the transformation is going to be very complicated. It's going to just imagine you have two systems running in parallel. One is the traditional one, which is based on like RSA 2048 or ECDSA 256, while at the same time you need to build a post-quantum system in parallel. And then it's not just migrating the data. Migrating the data is very complicated. It's very important. And also a lot of so-called the weakest link in the system is actually coming from that migration itself. In addition to that, we also need to have a clear workflow on how those newly created data should be stored only on the post-quantum system, security system, rather than stored in both the traditional system, which is based on ECDSA or RSA, and also on the post-quantum. So that's why this kind of plan, in my opinion, has to be done now, right now. And just imagine that for every this kind of MNCs, they have tons of information, they have so many different departments, and that kind of like education, data migration, as well as the disaster recovery. Imagine when you do the migration, there might be some hiccup coming out. Nobody can expect that. And if that thing happened, how are we going to do this kind of like disaster recovery? That's also going to be very challenging. So that's why I think there is no simple answer to this challenging question. But that's why we are also seeing many more and more MNCs, they are actually setting up special task force just to study and look into, and also to set up the policies on how to migrate their data and how to create their newly data and store them securely in post-quantum secure systems.
That is a brilliant point. And actually, that brings me to my next point about cryptocurrencies. And we obviously hearing a lot about blockchain cryptocurrencies, specifically in this particular scenario. Now, when we look at the vulnerability, do we see the same vulnerability in this technology to quantum algorithms, or is it slightly different? And let's probably you would want to take the case of, say, Bitcoin and try to help us and the audience understand how do cryptocurrencies manage this quantum risk differently?
Sure, yeah, definitely. So I think if you compare the so-called quantum impact on the cryptocurrency part, I would not say it's easier or it's harder for the cryptocurrency systems to get upgraded. It's easier because we are actually just talking about one single system, but that system can be huge. Just think about the Bitcoin as well as the Ethereum. It's also much harder because it's very decentralized. So because of the decentralization, we need consensus from the community in order to get that upgraded. But let me just talk about what kind of impact the quantum computer would be on the, say, the Bitcoin system, because what I'm going to talk about right now basically applies to almost all other crypto systems, like 99% of all the major systems. So for example, like Bitcoin relies on basically two major cryptographic schemes. One is the digital signature scheme, right? Because every time when you send tokens out, you have to digitally sign your transaction in order to show that you have the ownership of it. The second thing is basically the hash function, the cryptographic hash function. We call it the SHA hash function. And the hash function is mainly used on the digital signature scheme and also for the proof of work consensus protocol. So these two are basically like the fundamental of Bitcoin system or a blockchain system. So Bitcoin is making use of ECDSA, elliptic curve digital signature algorithm, and which is vulnerable to quantum CRQC, the powerful enough quantum computer. So what it means is that if we apply an algorithm which was invented 32 years ago, back to 1994, by the MIT professor called Shaw, then if you have a powerful quantum computer, you can actually just apply that algorithm and then break the ECDSA. Breaking ECDSA means that if you have a public key, then you can reverse it to get the private key. So what does that mean for Bitcoin is that, say, if you send a transaction out, send some Bitcoin out, which means your public key is already on the ledger, on the blockchain system. So your public key will be on the blockchain system, and hackers can basically reverse your public key back to the private key, and then the hacker basically owns your wallet. So that's disaster. And if you look into Bitcoin, the first type of Bitcoin addresses, I mean, what Satoshi Nakamoto was using at that time, we call it the P2PK, pay to public key, which basically means that the public key is on the blockchain system. So everybody can just go and download a full copy of the Bitcoin network, I mean the Bitcoin ledger, and then you can actually see the public key of Satoshi Nakamoto. So imagine if you were the hacker, you already got the Satoshi Nakamoto's public key, and then you know Satoshi Nakamoto has 1.1 million BTC. in that wallet address, what will you do? As a hacker, what you would do is to just get access to a quantum computer and then get the public key from the ledger of Bitcoin and reverse it so that you get the private key of Satoshi Nakamoto. Basically, you own the wallet of Satoshi Nakamoto. So if you extend this kind of concept, and then just think about right now, Bitcoin has altogether 21 million Bitcoins, and then we have already mined 20 million Bitcoin out. And then the next question I would like to ask is how many Bitcoins that they are holding in the wallets where those wallets public keys are already out on the network. Because if your public keys of your wallets are already out in the network, then a quantum computer, a powerful enough one, can hack it. And according to the estimation, 6.5 million BTC are stored in wallets where their public keys are already exposed. So which basically means that if some hackers that they have a powerful enough, according to the latest research, if you have like 10,000 physical qubits, you can basically break all those wallets and you can own 6.9 million BTC. So you will be the number one in terms of the number of BTCs that you are holding once you have that powerful quantum computer. So that's the impact of quantum computer against cryptocurrency. Yeah, let me just stop over here.
No, I guess that's one of the things that it's scary at the same time. It's also about when it comes to the Bitcoin blockchain as well, a large number of the holders are unknown, right? And I would say, just given the nature of it, we know some of them being publicly out there, like Michael Saylor and others, but a vast majority of them are just addresses. Some are exchanges, which we recognize, but that just brings that question that even if people are hacked and the value is transferred, you may not be aware of it in initial stages as well. Unless the Nakamoto wallet gets drained, that is likely everybody will know. But for the other wallets, you just may think it's a whale doing some transfers if the hackers are smart about it. But on the other side, I guess just as a follow-up, Duncan, and then I also want to bring in Reena to talk about broadly mitigation conversations. But how does one mitigate not just for Bitcoin, but for other blockchains? And I know with Abelian, you've been looking at it as well. But broadly speaking, how are you able to accomplish or protect the existing infrastructure versus something that is freshly built to be quantum resistant?
So maybe let me start first regarding this part, because I've also been involved in some of those upgrades. So just think about the Bitcoin scenario that I mentioned over here. In fact, as long as you send your BTC out from a particular address and that address is already compromised, it's already susceptible or vulnerable against quantum computer. And to do the upgrade, the community is already looking into solutions. For example, one prominent standard is called BIP 360, so which is basically a Bitcoin improvement protocol proposal. And this proposal basically describes how we will be able to, say, add a new wallet address or wallet type to, say, a Bitcoin system. And imagine you have a new wallet type, and then the underlying digital signature is a post-quantum digital signature. And once you have a post-quantum digital signature to support this wallet type, and then once you transfer all your tokens from your legacy ECDSA type wallet to this post-quantum wallet, before the quantum computer becomes powerful enough, then you are all good. You will be safe. Right. So right now, the entire community, the entire developer group, they are all working towards this one. But the challenging part is not about the technical thing. Of course, the technical part is also challenging. In addition to the challenging part of the technical aspect, another part is that what if some of the Bitcoins that they are not yet transferred to quantum safe wallets, to quantum resistant wallets, while the quantum computer already become mature, right? So are we going to set up a deadline? And after that deadline, say 5 years from now, we are going to freeze all the tokens that fail to do the transfer. Are we going to freeze that, or are we still going to allow that? If we still allow that, then there's no way for us to tell whether this is actually coming from a hacker or not. So this kind of like debate keep going on, and there's no consensus yet. And I really hope that there will be a consensus coming up very soon to do that. But basically, this is one of the major things that Bitcoin, or basically the blockchain society, is talking about. The second approach is also what I'm currently working on, is to build a brand new system that I started the whole thing several years ago on Abelian, is to design a new blockchain system, which is by design quantum resistant. So we make use of some of the technologies, for example, called lattice-based cryptography, to build a system which is already quantum resistant. And then we try to give one more option to the industry rather than replacing Bitcoin. We try to give one more option so that everybody can diversify their portfolio rather than putting all their assets, the digital asset, into BTC. Instead, they will put some into BTC. They will also put some into, for example, Able and so on. So I believe we should actually do both of them in parallel. They are not exclusive to each other. And yeah, I'm pretty optimistic regarding this, because everybody right now is already looking into it. It's no longer educational stuff, but it's actually just thinking how to upgrade your system and how to diversify your digital assets.
Thanks, Duncan. I think that's a very valid point, that unlike a couple of years ago, it was largely educational and people were thinking it's out there, and a few years later, what we are now seeing is most of the major technology firms, consulting firms, and of course the financial services firms themselves are looking at this as a priority. Reena, I wanted to bring you in as a build up to what Duncan was also talking about, and we spoke from a blockchain digital assets perspective, but also from a financial services and the fintech world, right? Regulated fintech world. Let's just use that as the case maybe here. How are you seeing their challenges to deal with the upcoming quantum threats? Do you see how well prepared are they, or what are the barriers for them to get prepared to handle these?
Sure. I think, Duncan brought out very, very clearly the complexity in a single system, right, which is such a massive system, the blockchain system itself. When you think of banks, you have to think about the number of applications and what does a banking infrastructure mean for nations, right? So banking is actually a critical infrastructure for the nation. These days, when wars are fought, they are not just fought on the battleground, but because national critical infrastructure is impacted, as we've seen, utilities and being targeted in all the wars that are happening in the Middle East, right, in the West Asia region. So banking infrastructure is the cornerstone for the economy and for all economic transactions that are happening between nations. So when we think of banks, we think of them as individual entities, and we think of the banking financial services, but think of the overall infrastructure, which also includes international payment transactions, which includes all the trading that is happening, which includes financial transactions, and all the enablement that the banking sector does. Now, if you look at all of these applications and these networks and systems that enable all of this, they all have to become post-quantum secure. So very often when people think about post-quantum secure, we think about PQC, which is post-quantum cryptography, and some of the standards that Duncan talked about. They are very, very relevant for moving individual algorithms to post-quantum secure algorithms. But when we look at the larger infrastructure and when the network comes into the picture, there are multiple technologies that need to be looked at. So for example, quantum key distribution technology, which is a hardware-based technology, quantum technology for quantum communications, which actually helps you distribute the quantum key over the network. Then also quantum communication technologies or entanglement-based quantum communication, which creates secure channels for communication, right? So in all of these, then there are also, when we look at how the infrastructure is going to move forward, it's not a single entity problem. So the bank can do something. What happens to the network? So the telecom sector comes into the picture for the banks, right? So now there is cross-sectoral dependency that comes into the picture. So ITU, International Telecommunications Union, is actually working on giving direction for how post-quantum secure environment has to be achieved. And there is a discussion happening on how the transport layer protocols have to start conforming. The SSL secure socket layers have to move to algorithms which are going to be secure in nature. There's a lot of hash algorithms that are actually used at the network layer, and all of them have been found to be vulnerable from quantum attacks. But in the interim, what do the banks do? Do we actually, or the banking systems do? Do we wait for everything to fall into place before we move there? No. So basically, there are quantum companies who are providing solutions for the interim as well. So there are companies that exclusively work on creating wrapper functions, which are quantum secure wrapper functions, which actually form a wrapper around all the data that you send out on the network. Right, so there are solutions which are emerging, which are combination of these NIST recommended algorithms, the crystal lattice algorithms, and the substitute for the hash functions and others, and then quantum key distribution, some of these wrapper algorithms, and individual efforts that companies are moving to move their infrastructure. Product companies are making to move their infrastructure to compliant environments. So I think all of this has to be taken into account. So it becomes very, very complex for a bank. I would say that the role of the regulator becomes extremely important, because they have the opportunity and the authority to bring the sector together, at least in a country and in regions and then internationally, to come together and set out guidelines, set out roadmaps, create opportunities for conversations so that the key challenges can be highlighted and common solutions can be found, right? And there is still a lot of discovery. We don't know, as people are preparing for this, preparation has already started. You can see a lot of banks actually getting into discovery. If you look at JP Morgan Chase, they are pretty advanced on their quantum journey. Then you look at banks like HSBC, who are doing a lot of work in this space. Even the State Bank of India right now is, looking at post-quantum security. So definitely there are banks that are working on this. What are the regulators doing? So until a couple of years ago, the regulators were also not doing much. I know as part of one of the meetings that I was as part of the Quantum Global Futures Council at World Economic Forum, we had invited the regulators in the banking sector from across the world to be part of a conversation. And I think we got around 5 or 6 regulators from different countries to be part of the conversation. And we could see that, this was 2.5, 3 years ago, and this was pretty early. People were just trying to have, set some guidelines and stuff like that. Today, if you look at the situation in India, SEBI has actually set some guidelines for people to start looking at discovery, for the financial institutions to start looking at discovery and start preparing a plan, right? And from the National Quantum Mission, as part of the Department of Science and Technology, a task force was formulated a few months ago, especially for the banking sector. And that task force has come out with some recommendation, a report has come out. And I think it is a matter of time before the regulators now start giving more direct, there are guidelines, but this needs to go into depth for things to move forward faster. Dates have to be set, saying, you need to move your systems to a certain state by this date, and this is the format. These are some of the things that you have to accomplish before you can say that you've finished phase 1 or phase 2, however you are going to, lay it out. And so all of that is work in progress, right? And as Duncan really pointed out, it's very, very complex. So it is going to take time. And as things are moving, we may discover new things, right? The good thing is that from an international standardization perspective, while these new PQC, post-quantum cryptography standards came out in 2024, the work has not stopped. The global working group actually continues to look at other alternates, and there are attempts to try and break these existing standards as well. So I think that work is progressing. One thing I would like to point out is that as we do this massive transformation across nations, I think there is an opportunity to bring in crypto agility. So how do you design your systems in such a modular manner as you do these transactions, use it as an opportunity to do restructuring in a manner that tomorrow, if you have to change the algorithms again, then you already have a fixed pathway to do so, right? Because that is the need of the hour. Let me bring in a very interesting different topic from quantum. I'm also part of the Global Futures Council for Next Generation Computing at the World Economic Forum. And in that group, the experts around the group, around the world, are actually looking at the fact that the future is not about one computing paradigm. And we are very seriously looking at classical computing, high performance computing, quantum computing, biological computing, space computing. And when we're looking at all of these paradigms, we don't know the nature of threats that are going to emerge from a security perspective from some of these other technologies that are there. So not just for quantum, because it is not just about quantum, I think this is a great opportunity for banks to prepare for the future, to actually look at the entire crypto agility, and use this opportunity to bring in more of that. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question for you. When you mentioned about the regulators and policymakers, now in your experience and working with them, specifically policymakers, are they open to the idea how consultative are they in their approach? And also, if you could help our audience understand which countries seem to be leading the way, what are some of the quantum-related innovations that some countries are leading in? It would be really helpful to understand what the landscape globally seems to look like.
So I think quantum technologies versus quantum computing is a completely different arena, okay? In the sense that quantum technologies are about computing, communication, sensing, quantum materials, and the overall impact is much higher, right? And then, of course, quantum is a dual purpose technology also. So which means apart from the security attack, there are defense applications on the quantum sensing side as well, right? Now, so I guess from your question perspective of who's leading, I think there are many countries who are leading overall development in quantum science and technology. Some of them started much earlier. So obviously the US has a lot of focus in this space. They've been doing a lot of work. China has put in a huge amount of money, more than anybody else on the planet. And they have been at it for, decades. So they are really far ahead. A lot of work happening in Europe and Australia and also Singapore and other locations. India started its national quantum mission, came into the picture in 2023, but we've made remarkable progress in that time frame. For example, in 2021 we had 4 quantum startups in India. The number is 100 plus. So that's for a country like India, when the masses get interested in something, then the expansion happens pretty fast. Nothing happens in small numbers in India, right? Because so many people who are engineers and so many people who want to do this work. So I would say overall, it looks very different. Somebody is doing a lot more work in certain areas. If you want to look where the quantum computing companies are concentrated, so maximum number of these companies are in the United States. And then, of course, you have a couple of very promising ones in Europe. And now there is a quantum computing company, QPI AI, who has a 64-qubit computer in India, right? So I think there is things happening everywhere. From an implementation perspective, from a banking sector implementation perspective, I think Singapore has done a lot more work. They have a test bed, and both HSBC as well as JP Morgan Chase, they are part of that test bed, and they have done a fair amount of work in this space, right? So you can see that wherever there are financial, and Singapore is a financial hotspot. So one would argue that, one expects that they would be doing a lot more things early on compared to others. And then, of course, everywhere else, people are catching up on the implementation. One thing I want to point out is that from a post-quantum security deadlines perspective, US government has set very clear deadlines in terms of when they want all government systems to move to a post-quantum secure environment, right? So I think they have done a very extensive job of setting deadlines, both for the core government offices as well as their contractors working with those offices and stuff like that, right? So yeah.
Absolutely. Duncan, can I also ask you to comment on this question and how you're seeing the landscape globally in terms of both regulation,
Yeah.
policymakers, and innovation?
Sure. Yeah. So I actually, Reena has just given a pretty comprehensive coverage on that. And just add on what Reena mentioned in the last statement over there, we can actually take reference to what US is currently doing. The US government made the announcement, as Reena mentioned. In fact, by 2030, so 4 years from now, for all the new federal government systems that they want to set up, it has to be post-quantum. So that's basically one of their policy thing. Another thing is that by 2035, so 9 years from now, then all the existing, say, the ECDSA, RSA systems have to be so-called replaced, right? And basically, in 9 years' time, the US government basically mandate the federal government to abolish all the existing traditional legacy systems and change everything to PQC. So this basically gives a very important guideline to all the MNCs, major companies, and also the rest of the world about their own policy. I think the US government has given us a very good example about what kind of like high level deadlines that we should have. And then once we have this kind of high level guidelines, then we can work out all the details about the policy stuff. In addition to that, Reena also mentioned about the standard back to 2024, if I remember correctly. The NIST published some standards, PQC standards, encryption standards, digital signature standards. And NIST is going to announce a bit more standards coming up. Why are they publishing more and more PQC standards? It's because nobody in the world, including those standardization body, can be confident enough to say that, hey, today I have an algorithm, and this algorithm is secure enough against quantum computer in the near future. So that's why Reena also mentioned one more thing is the crypto agility. So the crypto agility is just so important, which basically require all the systems to be able to switch from one PQC system to another PQC system quickly if one PQ system is actually considered to be no longer secure in the future. So cryptographic agility, I think, is a very important concept that all the major companies that they actually need to adopt in their policy. So just like on the cryptocurrency industry, we always look into crypto agility as well. The BIP 360 I mentioned, or Abelian, that the project that I'm working on, we are all embracing this crypto agility, which means when you send a token out from the sender to the receiver, you can actually sign that transaction using different algorithms at the same time. So what I mean is that when you do the digital signature, you can sign with algorithm A, algorithm B, and algorithm C. So 3 algorithms. And then just in case, say 10 years from now, algorithm A is actually broken, then you still have algorithm B and C protect your transactions or your wallets. So we can switch that efficiently and in a very low cost and in a very seamless handover way. That's actually also very, very important. So I would like to just take the opportunity to highlight what Reena mentioned over there and further elaborate on it a bit over here. Yeah.
Thank you, Duncan. And this has been a great conversation for us to get into what has been a very complex subject, right? But you both have been very articulate in simplifying it for the audience while retaining the technical elements of it. Before we wrap up or close, I wanted to get both of your thoughts on specifically looking on the flip side. So we've talked a lot about the threats and the impact that quantum is going to have on our existing ecosystem and the industry broadly. but would love to hear from both of you in terms of how we can flip that in terms of opportunities, right? With existing infrastructure or with new infrastructure. Duncan, I'll start with you and then we'll get Reena's thoughts on it.
Sure. Yeah. So maybe I focus on the blockchain area.
Sure.
So about the cryptocurrency area, what we are seeing is that this post-quantum or quantum resistant security is already a very, very hot topic in the cryptocurrency industry. We are not talking about whether we want to change or not. We are actually racing against time on who's going to be the first to get ourselves quantum safe, or so-called future ready. So about this area, definitely I have been working on this since 2017, started from the research, and then 5 years later, back to 2022, we launched that Abelian system. And then throughout these 4 years, we continue improving it. We have made a few major upgrades. And then by this year, we are also adding more cryptographic agility into the system. So what we are doing and what we are seeing in the near future is that in the entire crypto industry, everybody will embrace cryptocurrency. And there are two aspects. One is to see whether the chain is ready against quantum attack or not. The second part is that how you will be able to upgrade or migrate from the legacy system to a PQC system seamlessly without leaving anybody behind. That's the ideal case. But unfortunately, right now, what we are seeing is that Satoshi Nakamoto really need to figure out, or if he's alive or the group is alive, then we really need to figure out how to migrate that 1.1 million. In addition to that, actually altogether 6.9 million BTCs really need to be migrated. And it's the same thing for all other kinds of cryptocurrency digital assets as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Reena, your thoughts on turning this threat into opportunity, as it were?
So quantum actually does offer a lot of other opportunities, right? So from the perspective of, from a banking sector perspective, there are algorithms that could be leveraged for, so quantum is very good for optimization problems. And those optimization algorithms are being used today, right? Because these are pseudo quantum. This is more like quantum inspired algorithms where, so there is this concept, there is a concept of, if you have enough data which is organized in a certain way, then and you're trying to find the lowest minima. That's what you try to do in an optimization problem. And all classical algorithms give you solutions which are not very accurate. So through using quantum, you're able to get much better optimization solutions, whether you're optimizing a route or you're trying to optimize a portfolio. So in the case of banks, I think portfolio optimization is something, also fraud detection, right? So this is going to actually improve fraud detection in many ways. Also high-speed trading. There are some applications for algorithms that would be relevant for high-speed trading. I just want to make you aware that all the algorithms that I'm talking about right now, most of the banks are using them, are working on them. Who are working on them are doing proof of concepts, prototypes. I think real deployment is a little few years away, but everybody is actively working on these, and there are many solutions that are coming up in this space. Yeah. So it's also going to have a competitive advantage. So when we talk to banks, for example, we were having a conversations with RBI's fintech arm, right? So they have a group which is focused on fintech, and we're having a conversation, and they were like, they are also interested in the competitive advantage that it will give to whoever is actually approaching quantum, not just the threat, right? I mean, so there is this whole angle as well. And the real challenge in this space is, it's not like tomorrow if we say these solutions are available, people are now, some banks have adopted this. The other banks will not be able to immediately adopt because there's a huge learning curve. And also there is this understanding of what is the nature of the team that you need to build for actually developing such algorithms for your systems or integrating such algorithms for your systems, and how are you going to make it work. So the whole learning curve is pretty steep. So many banks are actually, that's why diving in early, and they're doing all these proof of concepts and prototypes so that they have the edge when they can start using these algorithms in the commercial systems. So all in all, it is, I think I'm actually represent the quantum ecosystem in India. So I would say that we should, banks should be, they're paying attention, but I think they should pay more attention to this technology. Is what I would say.
Can I ask a last 30-second question to both of you? For everyone listening in and whoever has heard so far, kudos to them because it's a very interesting subject. But we want to leave everyone with a short 30-second capsule on what are some of the practical steps that fintechs, banks, crypto companies, Satoshi Nakamoto, everybody should be taking today to be to be quantum agile and be quantum risk ready.
That's a good question. Yeah, so I think right now everybody has heard about a lot about quantum computing, how powerful it is, and also the other side, which is how deadly quantum computer can be against our existing systems. So basically, there are always two sides. In addition to, actually, Reena also mentioned one more thing is the quantum key distribution. That's actually the third topic. So in order to make sure we keep up the pace of the technology development and all that, I think we really need to, hopefully we will be able to join some of the consortiums, alliance. I know I'm in Hong Kong, and the Hong Kong has a few related associations, alliance set it up so that we can mingle with people, study about that, and also learn from each other, especially, for example, like CIOs of those companies. They definitely need to exchange this kind of information with each other, set up the wise and smart strategy and policies for their company and so on. For individuals, if you are interested in this, always go down to X. I also have a handle there. And my mission over there is to educate the not just the industry, but also everybody, try to share all those factual information so that everybody would have a chance to learn more about all this information, while our job is to collect all the information and try to digest it and translate that into what layman can understand and try to deliver that message as much as possible.
Thank you so much. With that, over back to Musheer.
Reena, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think Duncan covered it very well. I would say that, everybody who is a professional in the tech ecosystem needs to they cannot afford to ignore quantum. So they have to make themselves aware of quantum in the context of who they are. Because there are physicists and there are researchers who go really deep into quantum. But if you are a CTO of an organization, you need to understand it in a slightly different context. And if you are a programmer, you need to understand in a slightly different context. So, and people who are doing policy making need to understand in a slightly different context. And this is one of the reasons why when we are driving awareness sessions in India and even certification programs in India on this topic, we have separate trainings for quantum for policymakers. We have a separate one for business leaders. And then we have a separate one for tech professionals and students, right? And in fact, we've broken it down to the next level, saying quantum for financial sector, quantum for the energy sector, because when we do this, we talk about all the ways that people can leverage not just computing, but sensing and other technologies for the relevant sector. So www.qetci.org, you can go there, and we also have a LinkedIn page, and people can reach out to us if they're interested in knowing more, even if they want to get sessions organized for their company or for the business leaders and stuff like that. Yeah, so we do enable that too.
That is super. Thank you so much, and Reena and Duncan, for your inputs. It's been an extremely invigorating session for all of us in the arena who are still learning about being quantum ready, quantum agile, and actually being quantum risk averse to whatever we are building out. This has been extremely exciting to not just hear about the risks, but also about the possibilities. Thank you for both for joining us, and thank you to Musheer for hosting and FinStep Asia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
It was a wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you both. And to the audience, stay tuned for more. Follow us on our various social media pages to hear about such interesting topics and where we are. And we would love to have Duncan and Reena back with us to talk about the opportunities and the progress maybe in a few months' time as well. So thank you all. And we look forward to continuing our dialogues with FinTech Decoded.